Nicolae Ceaușescu, the leader of Romania, was a figure who combined absolute power with extravagant luxury. In the heart of Bucharest, a colossal structure rises above the city, a testament to the ambitions and paranoia of one of the 20th century's most notorious leaders, Nicolae Ceaușescu. The Palace of the People, now known as the Palace of the Parliament, is not just an architectural marvel. It is a symbol of a regime obsessed with control, surveillance, and the projection of power. Ceaușescu, who ruled Romania with an iron fist from 1965 until his dramatic downfall in 1989, was determined to leave his mark on history. He envisioned the palace as the centerpiece of his vision for a new Romania, a place where the might of the state would be visible to all, and where the machinery of government could operate in secrecy and security. But beneath the marble floors and grand chandeliers, the palace was also designed as a nerve center for monitoring the Romanian people, a fortress from which Ceaușescu and his inner circle could keep watch over every aspect of daily life. The construction of the palace was not merely an act of vanity or a display of architectural prowess. It was, at its core, a tool for surveillance and control. Ceaușescu's regime invested heavily in the latest surveillance technology of the era, importing equipment from the Soviet Union and developing its own methods for monitoring the population. Hidden rooms and secret passageways were built into the palace's design, allowing security personnel to move unseen and eavesdrop on conversations. The walls themselves were rumored to be embedded with listening devices, and every office, corridor, and meeting room was potentially a place where the state could listen in. Outside the palace, the reach of the surveillance state extended into every corner of Romanian society. Security cameras, though primitive by today's standards, were installed in government buildings, factories, and even residential neighborhoods. Guards patrolled the streets, their eyes trained to spot any sign of dissent or nonconformity. The infamous Securitate, Romania's secret police, maintained a vast network of informants, ordinary citizens who were coerced or convinced to report on their neighbors, friends, and even family members. For the average Romanian, life under Ceaușescu's surveillance state was a daily exercise in caution and self-censorship. Every movement, every conversation, and every relationship could be scrutinized by the ever-watchful eyes of the regime. People learned to speak in whispers, to avoid discussing politics even in the privacy of their own homes, and to trust no one completely. The Securitate's reach was so pervasive that it is estimated 1 in 30 Romanians was an informant at the height of Ceaușescu's rule. This climate of fear and suspicion eroded the fabric of society, turning neighbors against each other and making genuine community almost impossible. The secret police kept meticulous records, documenting not only the actions, but also the thoughts and attitudes of citizens. Files were kept on millions of people, detailing everything from their daily routines to their private beliefs and social interactions. Even children were not immune. Teachers were required to report on their students' behavior, and children were encouraged to inform on their parents if they heard anything subversive at home. The psychological toll of living under such constant surveillance was immense. People became adept at hiding their true feelings, developing a kind of double consciousness, one face for the public, another for the private sphere. But even in private, there was always the nagging fear that someone might be listening, that a careless word could lead to interrogation, imprisonment, or worse. The palace of the people, with its imposing facade and labyrinthine corridors, stood as both the literal and symbolic heart of this surveillance state. It was a place where power was concentrated, but also where paranoia reigned. Ceaușescu himself was obsessed with the idea that he was surrounded by enemies, both real and imagined. He demanded absolute loyalty from his subordinates and punished even the slightest hint of dissent. The surveillance apparatus he built was not just a means of controlling the population. It was also a way of protecting himself from the very people he claimed to lead. In the end, the surveillance state could not save Ceaușescu from the forces of history. In December 1989, as revolution swept through Romania, the people rose up against the regime that had watched them for so long. The palace of the people, once a symbol of unassailable power, became a monument to the excesses and failures of dictatorship. Today it stands as a reminder of a time when every detail of life was subject to scrutiny, and when the walls themselves seemed to have ears. The legacy of Ceaușescu's surveillance state lingers in the memories of those who lived through it, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of oppression. Nicolae Ceaușescu's lifestyle was the very definition of excess, a spectacle of luxury and indulgence that stood in stark contrast to the daily struggles of ordinary Romanians. As the self-proclaimed genius of the Carpathians, Ceaușescu surrounded himself with opulence on a scale that was almost unimaginable. His palaces were filled with marble floors, gold-plated fixtures, and crystal chandeliers that sparkled under the watchful eyes of his ever-present security detail. Every detail of his environment was meticulously crafted to reinforce his image as a leader above all others, a man who deserved the finest things in life. But beneath this glittering surface, there was always an undercurrent of fear, a constant, gnawing anxiety that the people he ruled might one day turn against him. Ceaușescu's paranoia was legendary. He insisted on elaborate security measures, from bulletproof limousines to secret escape tunnels hidden beneath his residences. Even his meals were subject to rigorous testing for poison, and he trusted almost no one outside his immediate family. The grand banquets he hosted, with their endless courses and the rare delicacies, were as much about displaying his power as they were about satisfying his appetite. Every guest was carefully vetted, every conversation monitored, and every toast delivered with a nervous glance over the shoulder. This unique blend of tyranny and eccentricity defined Ceaușescu's rule. He was a dictator obsessed with control, yet also a man driven by bizarre whims and personal quirks. For example, he maintained a private zoo stocked with exotic animals from around the world, a symbol of his desire to possess the rare and the unattainable. He commissioned custom-made suits from the finest tailors, and his wardrobe was said to rival that of any European monarch. His wife, Elena, shared his taste for extravagance, and together they amassed a collection of luxury cars, priceless art, and rare wines that filled the cellars of their many residences. Yet for all this grandeur, Ceaușescu could never escape the shadow of his own insecurity. He built secret panic rooms within his palaces, complete with steel doors and surveillance monitors, always preparing for the possibility of betrayal. His personal staff lived in constant fear of making even the smallest mistake, knowing that a single misstep could result in dismissal or worse. The atmosphere in his court was one of tension and suspicion, where loyalty was rewarded, but trust was in short supply. Ceaușescu's eccentricities extended beyond his personal life and into the very fabric of Romanian society. He issued bizarre decrees, such as mandating that all citizens address him with elaborate titles, and he demanded that his portrait be displayed in every public building. He even went so far as to have his own birthday declared a national holiday, complete with parades and orchestrated displays of adulation. These acts were not just expressions of vanity, they were calculated efforts to reinforce his cult of personality and remind the nation of his absolute authority. Despite the outward appearance of confidence, Ceaușescu's regime was always haunted by the fear of dissent. He relied on a vast network of informants and secret police to root out any hint of opposition, and he responded to criticism with swift and brutal repression. The people of Romania learned to speak in whispers, never knowing who might be listening. In this climate of fear, Ceaușescu's eccentricities took on a darker tone, becoming symbols of a leader who was both out of touch and deeply insecure. In the end, the lavishness of Ceaușescu's lifestyle could not shield him from the consequences of his tyranny. The very measures he took to protect himself, his palaces, his security, his elaborate rituals, became monuments to his isolation and paranoia. His reign serves as a cautionary tale of how absolute power can breed not only corruption, but also a profound sense of vulnerability. Ceaușescu's legacy is one of both extravagance and fear, a reminder that even the most powerful rulers are never truly secure from the people they govern. Nicolae Ceaușescu, the leader of Romania from 1965 until 1989, was the very embodiment of a dictator who constructed an alternate reality for himself, one that was meticulously designed to shield him from the hardships and struggles faced by ordinary people. In Ceaușescu's world, luxury was not just a privilege, but a necessity, a symbol of his power and a constant reminder to his subjects of the vast gulf that separated him from them. He lived in palatial residences adorned with gold marble and rare woods, while the people outside his walls queued for hours for bread, milk, and basic necessities. Ceaușescu's regime was defined by an obsession with control. Every aspect of Romanian life was monitored, catalogued, and scrutinized by the Securitate, the infamous secret police. Surveillance was not just a tool of governance, it was a way of life. Telephones were tapped, neighbors were encouraged to inform on each other, and even the most private conversations could find their way into government files. The fear of being watched was ever present, a silent force that shaped behavior and stifled dissent. But Ceaușescu's world was also one of grand illusions. He surrounded himself with loyalists who praised his every word, and he basked in the adulation of carefully orchestrated crowds. Propaganda was everywhere, in schools, on television, in the streets. Children were taught to revere him as the genius of the Carpathians, and his image was omnipresent, gazing down from posters and statues. The reality outside of poverty, hunger, and repression was hidden behind a facade of national pride and supposed progress. Inside his palaces, Ceaușescu enjoyed the finest foods, imported wines, and the latest Western technology, all while the country's economy crumbled and its people suffered. He and his wife Elena hosted extravagant banquets for foreign dignitaries, showcasing a Romania that existed only in their imagination. The contrast between their opulence and the deprivation outside was stark, yet Ceaușescu seemed either oblivious to or unconcerned by the suffering of his people. His desire for absolute control extended to every corner of society. He dictated what music could be played, what books could be published, and even how many children families should have. The state intruded into the most intimate aspects of life, enforcing policies that were often cruel and arbitrary. Yet, within the walls of his world, Ceaușescu remained insulated from the consequences of his decisions, convinced of his own infallibility. The relentless surveillance, the cult of personality, the pursuit of luxury, and the drive for total control all served to reinforce Ceaușescu's isolation. He became increasingly detached from reality, surrounded by sycophants and shielded from criticism. The world he inhabited was one of his own making, a world where he was always right, always revered, and always in command. Yet beneath the surface, resentment simmered. The people of Romania endured years of hardship, their voices silenced by fear, but their anger growing with each passing day. Ceaușescu's world, for all its grandeur and control, was built on a foundation of repression and denial. In the end, it was this very isolation and refusal to see the truth that led to his downfall. Ceaușescu's story is a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power. It shows how a dictator, living in a world of luxury and surveillance, can lose touch with the reality of those he rules, and how, ultimately, that world can come crashing down.